So, okay, ready? Good afternoon, everyone. The Sacramento City Council will come to order. Would the clerk please call the roll so that we might establish a quorum?
Councilmember Ashby.
Yep, here.
Councilmember Harris.
Here.
Councilmember Hanson.
Here.
Councilmember Chenier.
Here.
Councilmember Guerra.
Here.
Councilmember Jennings.
Here.
Councilmember Carr.
Here.
Mayor Steinberg.
Here.
And I expect Councilmember Warren momentarily.
All right. Thank you very much, Madam Clerk, and thank you to the members of the public. I'm here at my usual place on the dais here, but appropriately distanced with the city attorney to my right, the city manager to my left, the city clerk, and her assistant sitting in front of me here. And I welcome all of you to another meeting where we meet in a different form than we are used to. And we're getting used to it, but I guess we don't want to get too used to it. But we're doing the very, very best we can. Today, we gather to have a workshop on the city's opportunity to invest $89 million of federal stimulus dollars as a result of COVID-19. And I'd like to make just a very brief opening set of remarks, and then I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues and to the public. Mayor and colleagues, as your mayor, as you know, on May the 12th, I put out my thoughts to start one of the most important conversations our community will have over the months and the years ahead. I suggested 4 categories to divide, if you will, this $89 million in a way that I suggest, and it's only one suggestion, might best meet the impacts of COVID-19. The 4 categories, of course, are assistance to small business, workforce affected by COVID-19, workforce training and retraining for the thousands affected by the economic disruption as a result of COVID-19, affordable housing and homelessness, and mitigating the impact to tourism and our creative economy as a result of the coronavirus. I want to thank the manager, the attorney, colleagues, and the community for virtually none of the ideas in the letter are my original ideas. They are an accumulation of things that I have heard from colleagues and from the community, not just over the last 8 weeks, but frankly, over the last several years as we have worked together to build a modern, inclusive economy. Today, I know as your mayor, I want to hear from my colleagues and the public. By the end of this workshop, I hope that we have a clear direction. We will take that direction and work with the city manager and my colleagues to develop a clear, transparent, and inclusive process to decide on the specific investments best able to help people, to jumpstart our recovery, and to regain the momentum we clearly had before this unprecedented crisis hit our city, the state, the country, and the world. Today, we will not vote on any particular decisions, but listen and take the input, again, from colleagues and the public. This is the start of an intensive 90 to 120-day process to get going, as the law requires, as you know, that the money be spent, and we'll want to define that throughout the course of this discussion by December the 31st, 2020. This opportunity and suggested construct has generated a robust response, and this is a very good thing. I love that the community sees this in the same way we all do, that this opportunity is crucial, that this opportunity must reflect our values, including the value of inclusion, and that we insist that we both respond to the emergency and also create new opportunities for people who may have to now think differently about their own economic futures and their own career pathways. Let us get to it. I would like to, we assume that we have a number of members of the public who are queued up, but I think we should first open it up to the city council. And I know I've gotten some texts and emails from members here. We'll close hear from everyone. I want to start with Councilmember Chenier. Jay?
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate that. I'm going to be brief, but I want to just put on the table a couple of thoughts around process. And I know that we all have received multiple sets of recommendations from groups around the city, which I think is fabulous. And I don't know about you all. I haven't really had time to go through all of those. But I hope that's something our staff can do. My hope is that we keep this afternoon's conversation at a fairly high level. Think about the questions that we need to ask of the different types of projects that we have the opportunity to fund, and think about those specific questions, and maybe even develop a rubric to judge these projects by. We probably, my guess is we have multiple hundreds of millions of dollars worth of things on the table that people have put forward that we're going to have to make some decisions about. I'm personally fine with the mayor's 4 buckets. I'll come back to what I think we should do with those things. I also think we need to think both in the immediate term and then as we go forward. As we go forward, we have, I guess, between 60, 90, or 120 days to really decide where we want to spend, I think, the bulk of the money. I also think that there are some very specific things that we need to jump on if we want to get things funded to alleviate some real dire circumstances. For me, there's a couple of things. One is around small businesses. I think we were very, very successful in the $1 million putting it out. And we also learned a lot while we did it. Most importantly, we learned that we could put out 101 grants in 2 weeks. So we can do this quickly. And we should take those learnings and apply them to some of the things that we'll be doing here as well. Also, really important, I think, and no surprise to anyone, will be what we're doing for young people over the summer. I don't know how we're doing with YPC with all of the vacancies that we have, with making changes from in-person camps or programming to virtual programming, but we simply cannot leave thousands of kids without the opportunities over the summer, particularly since the fact that many of our most at-risk neighborhoods and those young people have fallen behind because of the school situation and that closing. In a conversation with Mr. Guerra yesterday, he talked about domestic violence, and I'm sure he'll bring that up. That's something that has gone through the roof here. And so those are the types of things that I think we could talk about immediately. I think that on the youth piece, Mr. Mayor, I've talked to a number of folks and staff about doing a workshop on youth. Staff talked about that a while ago. I'd like to do it with our youth council, with our youth commission rather, to talk about those long-term investments as well. So I guess where I am is 2 things. One is I want to use what we learned in the small business loan program that we put together and think about some other things that we could do along those lines. For me, again, if I go back to the youth component, can we take some amount of money, I don't know exactly what it is, and put it out through an RFP for the city and community organizations to run summer programs and get their best ideas? I don't know that we know what the best thing is, but I think we could put something out there with a set of goals that we want to accomplish around possibly summer learning, around enrichment, but really around safe places for young people during the summer. We can't ignore that at all. If we don't do that, I think the problems on the other side of that will far outweigh the cost of doing it. So I'd like to put that on the table. I think that we should develop, as I said, some type of rubric. To me, some of the questions are, for as we measure these things, and my hope is that staff can do it. What are the program goals? Who are going to run it? What are the partnerships that can come out of it? what are the metrics that we're going to use to measure success. If we can take those pieces and apply it, it's going to help us make decisions literally about the hundreds of programs that are going to be before us that we're going to have to make a decision on. We also, I think, need to think about sustainability, even though this is one-time money, if done properly. And hopefully this blends into a better economy for us over the next couple of years, and the return to measure you to the things that we thought. But we want to think about what programs are sustainable over time. So from there, that's really it as a starting point. I'm looking forward to the discussion and hearing what everybody has to say. But again, I hope we can, we all have programs that we'd like to see funded. How those interact with each other, how the sum becomes, or the whole becomes bigger than the sum of its parts, is something that is a challenge for us, I think. But we have an opportunity here with this much money to do well. So I will leave it at that, Mr. Mayor. As always, I'm concerned about the transportation issue for young people. I don't know if that's something I'd like to ask the city attorney about that, if that's something that we can use these funds for, if we have to figure something else out with that as well. But I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Do you want an answer to that question now, or are we just noting the question and we'll come back?
I think just noting the question again, I don't want to get into the programmatic level unless people have specific questions about things, but I'm not putting forward programs that we should be funded. I just want to see if that's eligible.
Okay. We'll put that on the list here, right? Thank you so much. Vice Mayor Harris.
Thank you, Mayor. When I look at this money from the federal government and look at the guidelines, it's clear that the intended use is to mitigate the impacts of the virus on our city. However those play out. I'd like to start by asking the city manager a question. And that is this, Mr. Chan. Of the 89 million, I am assuming, correct me if I'm wrong, but a certain amount of that has to be programmed immediately for direct mitigation efforts. Is that a fair statement?
That is, and we've actually taken some steps in advance of this hearing and the budget adoption tonight to do those things, and I will discuss those later this evening.
Okay, well, that's fair. So with that in mind, we're really perhaps not talking about $89 million, as some of it will be ascribed to conditions that need to be mitigated immediately. Is that true?
That's correct.
Okay, and you'll delineate that later. Thank you. Clearly what we need to do to jumpstart economy, and the most important thing that we need to focus on, is getting people back to work and maintaining the viability of all the businesses that are definitely at risk of going away and not being able to come back. We don't have real metrics on how many businesses that is, how many are really imperiled, how many can weather the storm. But it is my feeling that a substantial amount of the CARES Act money must be used for direct assistance to small business, because they are the staple of our employers in this city. We're a service-based economy, and it's imperative that we look at it, I think, through that lens of maintaining the viability of businesses and guaranteeing maximum employment as we start to be able to get people back to work. I believe the mayor agrees with me on that point. We might have a little bit of a difference about, say, percentage of the remaining money to be used for direct assistance. But I think that we all can agree that getting people back to work is imperative. Now, that being said, some businesses will go away permanently. And so job training is an important aspect of how we should use this money. And, there have been suggestions in the mayor's letter about possible programs to fund. And those debates I would leave for a different day, because there are many viable ideas out there, as Councilmember Chenier said. I think what we really need to do is figure out how we're going to make a clearinghouse for all these ideas, and, as Jay said, a rubric by which to merit the various projects and programs to understand how we get a bang for the buck. And again, what I mean by a bang for the buck is how many people can we get to work most quickly? How many businesses can we save? How can we train our workforce to come out of this really deep storm that we're in? There's another aspect that I think is very important to look at here, and that is this. A lot of federal money has been used to move homeless people into motels, and more money will be used, more people will be put into shelter as we move through this problem with coronavirus. Now that we have a number of people, hundreds actually, in shelter, I believe that it's imperative that we not just turn them back onto the streets. We have an opportunity here to leverage federal money against federal money to move a substantial piece of our homeless population into housing possibilities. We've discussed that. In fact, we talked about it a little bit last week about different housing products and types that we might affect to create space for people to gain housing coming out of shelter as a result of the coronavirus. And I believe that that's a perfectly appropriate use of the CARES Act money. It's important stuff. You know, the arts, Visit Sacramento, perhaps the Mobility Center, all of these are very viable places that we need to debate and discuss how many people we can get back to work by funding various projects and to what degree. So, Mayor, I want to say I appreciate you starting the discussion and putting out the ideas that you have, because they're all good. What I don't really comprehend at this point is how we're going to sift through these ideas and ascribe a certain dollar amount to each one. I'm a little fuzzy about that process. Perhaps you can address that when I'm done with my comments. I'd appreciate it if you did. So housing, homeless housing, triage and services, job training, arts. But the big thing is we've just got to get people back to work and understand how we can work within the framework of the governor's basic, stay in place order. And when it gets eased, how we can best enable our businesses to be viable. So, Mayor, maybe you can take a moment, please, and address what you might think would be a plausible way for us to start to divvy up the money. I mean, I know you put 20 million for this, 20 million for in 4 buckets, but there are many, many decisions to be made contained within those suggestions. And I'm wondering if you've put thought to how we get down to the final decisions of which programs to fund.
So I'll tell you one thing, Councilmember Vice Mayor Harris, that I'm worried about. I'm worried about the tight time frame that we have to make the decisions here. And that tight time frame, I think, instructs us that, in my view, it would be a mistake to try to stand up some new formal committee that would have to be constituted by the council, have to be stood up, rules of procedure, all the rest of that. I think we need to look at what we have already started in different but similar contexts. We have an investment committee through Measure U that is pretty broad-based and diverse. And I think we ought to use that as a starting point. And if appropriate or necessary, we could add to its membership. I think the investment committee, which was not subject to Brown Act and was meeting privately, ought to become a public body. But it should take a lot less work to be able to sort of reconstitute it in that way. We have, of course, the city manager and the city's economic development department, through which a number of these recommendations should flow through. Not just economic development, but on the youth side, it can be YPSI. On the tourism side, it can be Visit Sacramento and some of our other partners. And then I think we have our Budget and Audit Committee that can hear a tranche of recommendations. And then, of course, we ultimately have the full City Council. And so I would suggest that we not try to create some whole new mechanism, that we use and maybe improve upon what it is we have so that we can move quicker. I'm thinking, and again, we want to generate the discussion here. But if we have now essentially 4 months, if we have June, July, August, September, well, we have more than that. But let's just say 4 months because we want to stay far away from the December 31st deadline. That would potentially give us 4 tranches, if you will, to go through a process that involved a reconstituted investment committee, the budget and audit committee, the city manager and his various departments that oversee the respective pots or particular kinds of investments, ultimately the city council. And in that way, we've got something that is transparent and kind of understandable. I worry about making an $89 million decision in one council meeting sometime in November. I think we got to do it sequentially because some things may be more urgent, like small business assistance right now. Some things might be more, quote, shovel ready, whether it's a literal infrastructure project or not, might be ready to go and might not. And so there are items that sequentially might make more sense to take sooner rather than others. Those are my thoughts.
Well, I appreciate that, Mayor. And I think it's a plausible direction to go. But as you said, there are certain things that have a real imminent need, like support of small business. And we need to figure out a mechanism, I believe, to figure out how much money to put in that pot and how to get it out to the public as soon as possible, because the stress is immediate. It absolutely is. So I am prepared, and I have already started, putting percentages to the money of where I think it should go and very specific projects that I think will be helpful in various aspects, in job training, in housing the homeless, in assistance to small business. So what I am suggesting is that each council member create a document similar to your letter and then tender it to staff to start sorting through and, again, creating a clearinghouse for all these ideas. But once again, I do think we have to move very expeditiously on help to small business. All right, I'll yield the floor. Thank you.
Okay. And that, again, I think that makes the small business, you're right, is of the moment. And so if we were to invest these resources sequentially, I would think small business would be among, if not the very first category. And of course, I think the city manager would be a perfect repository, if you will, to send the ideas. I'd appreciate it if you'd CC me and however you want to do it. Thank you very much, Vice Mayor. Councilmember Guerra.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Appreciate the opportunity here. First, I want to just say I think your letter was very robust. I appreciate the multiple buckets per se, or the approach at it. And also the recommendation on process. And I think to Vice Mayor Harris's point, trying to figure out how do we move quickly means that we probably should not try to, again, reinvent something new for this situation. And then also help work with something that our staff already knows how to work with so that we can have them focus their energy on analyzing the needs and providing recommendations. So I do think using the investment committee as a sounding board for the staff, for the economic development department and the city manager is a good thing. I could see, because it's so large, rechanging that into a public body may be problematic. I prefer to get their advice and thoughts. At the end of the day, this council is the one who makes decisions. So I think it's, when it comes to the final act of the council, that's where the public hearing occurs. I do think that the Budget and Audit Committee is a good approach because last week we approved the guidelines presented by the city auditor to ensure that we follow the recommendations and the guidelines of the federal government. What we don't want to have is a situation where we approve funds, they're expended, and then there's a federal clawback. So I think using the Budget and Audit Committee, where our city auditor and our budget staff and city attorney are all working on reviewing items as they come forward as a prudent way to move forward, so that and it's something that our city staff already know how to use. So I think that's a good recommendation outlined in your letter. Does mean that the budget and audit committee will have to meet much more frequently, which is okay. So in process wise, I do also think, getting as much recommendations to the city manager so that they can begin to analyze them and have the city auditors review it is important. I've sent a letter to the city manager from what I've heard from constituents throughout the entire city and region. Some of those are district specific, but many of them are ones that we should also be looking at partnering with the county. We did receive $88.9 million on this, but the county's almost receiving about $190 million. And some of these efforts, I think, would be more successful if they were in partnership with the county. And using our existing committee process allows us to sift through which ones of those would be a regional approach that we want to work with the county on, and which ones are more specific to the city of Sacramento. I agree also on the issue of number one, looking at what is in the immediate and getting quickly at some of those immediate needs that people are in dire need of. So having 2 points of view here. What are the immediate things we can do, and then what are the things we need to plan for reopening and economic recovery? Yes.
I don't mean to interrupt you. I'm sorry. I just want to make sure we're able to hear everything you're saying, and I'm not sure if it's on your end with your computer or not. But your voice usually is not this soft.
Oh, sorry about that. Is that better?
That's better.
Okay. Sorry about that.
It's okay.
Thank you. So again, I think.
No, just kidding. We got most of it.
Good. No, I wasn't going to start over here. But I think again, using the infrastructure that we have in place is good. Looking at the immediate and then looking at reopening and recovery is important. So breaking those two up is in separating those needs. I think is having a process for that is good. On the immediate, as I mentioned to Councilmember Chenier, domestic violence is something that has increased so dramatically in this time. Within the first month, the report that came out from the Family Justice Center of the increase in their service calls was 30% just within that first month. And then in this last month, this last report, compared to last year's numbers of domestic violence, it was nearly 200% increase in cases of domestic violence and restraining orders. And so figuring out some of those immediate things, such as, helping our small business in the commercial corridors, helping families who are in drastic need. Those, I think, are some of the things that we should probably sift through quickly. As we've heard many from the staff, federal guidelines are changing and giving us more direction as time goes by. So I think we're also going to find out more information as we move forward, what those federal guidelines are. On the long term, I think ensuring that we start looking at how do we retrain workers for the economy, that's going to be critical. Whatever method we use, using our workforce agencies, our one-stop centers, our job centers, and clearly, I think one conversation that never gets brought up enough is having a conversation directly with the people affected. That means bringing in our youth. I know Councilmember Chenier brought up bringing the Youth Commission, and working directly with entities that represent workers, so that we're hearing directly from workers as well. So I'll leave it there. But again, Mr. Mayor, I appreciate your robust letter and the framework you put forward. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Guerra. Let me see who's next. Is it Councilmember Carr, Madam Clerk? Councilmember Hanson, excuse me, Councilmember Hanson.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll try not to repeat the comments of others. I will say thank you for your letter. I think it's a very good starting point on some important categories. I do think, though, that for as much as possible, some of the problems that we had before this, we're really going to have them after. Some of them are truly exacerbated by this. and some of them are created by this. I hope that as we go through the CARES Act funding process, that we do our best to attend to the immediate needs of the community, because this is one of the few opportunities to inject hope into many of these areas of the city where people really feel like there isn't much opportunity left, or they are particularly, whether they're an employee or a business, or maybe they're affected by the health impacts, where they really need leadership from us. I will agree and second the point that Councilmember Guerra made around the different roles of the state, the county, and the city. I know that some of the programs in your letter are meant to build upon efforts of the state and the county, contact tracing, for instance, through a health corps, as well as some of the work around housing and homelessness in particular, where money may continue to flow. So as much as we try to amplify some of those things, I also believe that the small business piece is very, very important. And one of the points that I think is not lost on the council is that our employment center in the city is really the central city. We have 100,000 people that usually come into work Monday through Friday. Prior to this, we have many of the visitor amenities, the places where we generate revenue for TOT, sales tax, and otherwise through the hotels. And we have a lot of the congregate spaces. E-permits alone, you look at the concentration of those, and anywhere where more than two would gather has been impacted with the Golden One shutdown, but also things like places like Ace of Spades, Harlow's, Faces, or the Depot, our restaurants. We have, I think, upwards of 70% of the city's restaurants in the central city. So as we look at this, it hopefully isn't lost that one of our main goals is going to be helping to hopefully get people back to work. Because if they can't work, even a temporary infusion of resources directly, as some emails we've received have asked for, are not going to solve their problems. And indeed, the city, we are looking at hopefully a balanced budget for the coming year because of the one-time resources we have. But if we can't get people back to work, they will not be able to pay their property taxes, their sales taxes, or some of the other things that we rely on to be the regional hub that the city is. So, I think about Chando's, I think about some of our Japanese restaurants, our Chinese restaurants that go back generations in the central city, like Frank Fast. And I hope that the way we look at this is holistically. And the process that we're working through today, I think, to Councilmember Schneer's point, if we get too deep in the weeds, I think we'll lose the ability to craft a process that's holistic. So I'm okay with sort of talking about this at the macro level. But I also believe that if we leverage this and businesses can reopen effectively because they have some capital to reopen, if they can get their workers back in to work, that will achieve a lot of good and will hopefully give people some solace in knowing that there is a path forward. As we still don't have clear guidance on phase 2 from the county when we can meet those targets the governor set out. I think a lot of people are beginning to worry, not just about the domestic violence issues that Councilmember Guerra raised, which I think are very significant. I know I talked to Councilmember Guerra about undocumented people, and it's been very clear that this federal aid to a certain extent can't help them because the federal government's perspective on undocumented people, which I know we disagree with vehemently. So what is the path for them, and how do we look at the CARES Act not only as one piece of the funding, but a central building block of our program? But Donate for Sacramento is another great example. The work of some of our partners through the chambers, particularly the Asian Chamber, the Rainbow Chamber, the Black Chamber, and the Hispanic Chamber. The work of our foundations and PBIDs as a way to leverage some of these activities to get into those corners of the city where we know we're going to have to do a little bit of work to leverage these dollars. I also just want to say that we continue to see very large impacts from some of the things going on by state policy and county policy, such as the jail and inmate releases. We've seen thousands of people released into the downtown core. And I believe that because there has not been programming related to helping those people who are being released, they're adding to the growing homelessness population. But those are people who we definitely need to ensure, whether it's services provided by the county or the state or supplemented by us, also need to be discussed, because it is a reality that our jail population in the county has been drawn down and those people are being released into the heart of our city. The state prison population is also, many people are being released ahead of schedule. And that big impact, if left without those folks, without the assistance they need to succeed, I think are going to cause another set of impacts beyond just the direct public health and economic impacts. So the 4 buckets themselves, I think, are good. I think we'll probably have to work with you, the city manager, and our colleagues in the community to see whether or not the 20 million demarcation, which I think you set us on a path to talk about, is right. Maybe small business assistance is more, as Councilmember Harris said. Maybe certain things rise and fall a little bit, but if we can get our people back on their feet, allow them to do what they want to do, which is to work and to be productive members of our city, and the businesses, particularly those small businesses who I've mentioned before, people have really staked their entire lives on these enterprises. They've seen their lives flash before their eyes with the ability to even run a viable business. And if we can give them that hope, I think we'll be successful. But I'm sure Mr. Carr will raise this idea just like Jay Chenier did. But the metrics of success and what our goals are, I think, need to be a little bit more clearly defined so we can measure it as we get through this process. Deploying the funds rapidly, to Councilmember Guerra's point, I think has to be done with a little bit more nimbleness. Whether that's through budget and audit or the Measure U committee, I'm not convinced that either of them are the right way to go. But I do think that, again, Jay said this, our staff showed with the deploying of the $1 million emergency grants that we started before even the stay in place order was issued, that we can move nimbly, we can move well. I just hope that we don't let hindsight, cause us to make this too bureaucratic and too cumbersome as we try to deliver these resources out and to support our staff on the front lines, also trying to combat COVID as part of their essential worker roles. So, all in all, I think it's a good start. I just hope that we can keep the big picture in mind as we work through these things. The last one is really the food access piece, and I would praise you, Mayor, for the work you and your staff did to launch the senior program. I hope that we can continue to grow that, because that's a triple win. It helps workers get back to work. It helps our smaller restaurants serve people, and it helps the seniors who, to Larry's point, are in the category of not being recommended to leave their shelter in place until much later in the year. So I'd like to see us do that, and also work with some of our small farmers to do community supported agriculture boxes, get fresh fruits and vegetables into the hands of people who otherwise need access to them. So I'll leave it at that, but good work. And I think we've got a lot of road ahead of us to get this done and to get it out.
Good. Thank you so much, Councilmember Hanson. Councilmember Carr, then Councilmember Ashby, then Councilmember Warren, and Councilmember Jennings. Go ahead, Councilmember Carr.
Thank you, Mayor. The number one call for service in District 8 is domestic violence. We see a lot of abuse. There was a lot of domestic violence before the virus. There's even more now. And I think to Councilmember Guerra's point, we need to put some resources in that effort with the county, because it's really impacting our community. I don't disagree with a lot of what's in your proposal, Mr. Mayor. I do think we need to, in our small business assistance program, whatever form that takes, we must focus on those businesses that are going to rehire people. And we also must look at our commercial corridors and especially our minority businesses that were not addressed in the original $1 million that we put on the street. It has been impressed on us that we did not reach far enough, we did not reach deep enough, we did not reach wide enough. One thing that hasn't been mentioned so far is the technical capability in our city. What the virus has shown us is that not all of the communities have equal access to technology, to computers, to Wi-Fi. I think this is an excellent opportunity for us to address that and to set as a goal that every member of our community will have access to Wi-Fi, will have access to a computer, one, so we can communicate with them and keep them informed, but two, so that they can do the things that they need to do to stay current in this environment. We have passed a ordinance that said people do not have to pay the rent for 120 days after the stay-at-home order is lifted. But many of those people are not going to have the money to pay the rent 120 days after the stay-at-home order is lifted. So I think as part of what we need to do with the CARES package is to establish a rental assistance program so that people, once they are rehired, can actually start making rent payments from the date that they are rehired, and that we help them during the time that they could not work. I think it's critical that we do this. I think a good portion of the money should go to that effort. The food assistance program should also continue. And Mr. Mayor, we should also do a survey. We should survey our public, not just the people who come to our committees, not just the people who call in, not just the people who are able to view us on the streaming devices. But let's do a survey of our community and find out directly from the people in the city of Sacramento what their needs are. And with that, I think I have covered my points in less than 2 minutes.
And we would have given you at least 3, so thank you. Thanks, Larry. Councilmember Pro Tem Ashby, Mayor Pro Tem, go ahead.
All right. Thank you, Mayor. So for me, this conversation has really 2 parts. I think Councilmember Chenier touched on the first part, probably in the way I most agree with, which is how we structure the dialogue and the conversation, because there are a lot of people who want to be a part of the dialogue and have good ideas and are doing good things. And I think people are impacted differently by COVID. I think if we took the time to do a survey, which I think would be a good idea. I know MyVang has done a survey. I know some of the women's organizations have done some surveys where we asked people how they were most affected by COVID. I think we might get some answers that are different from what we're hearing on the routine. So I'd love to do that, even if it was a quick one that the city put out. Our auditor has done some in the past. Perhaps he would help us with that. But I would like to include as many voices as possible. I have no idea how many people are on hold right now, but I do know a lot of people submitted comments and ideas, and some groups came together, and I'm sure you all have received them too, but lots of ideas from our community that are out there right now trying to serve people, whether it's through food or through mental health services or economic relief. I want to hear from those people, and I want to make sure that the idea base that we use to pull from includes everyone in Sacramento to the extent that they can and will be involved. I think we're better when there are more voices in the room, and I think there are a lot of voices that would like to participate in this dialogue. So the first part for me is the how. How are we doing it? I think Jay's idea around metrics and starting at a high level and then allowing a lot of voices in and then narrowing that down is a good one. I agree we don't have all the time in the world, but I think we can do that quickly. And I think our product will be better if we do. And we broaden outside of 4 general categories, or I don't really want to talk about 7 pages of ideas and everybody check the ones they agree with, although appreciate the starter fluid. I think the fire burns brighter if we don't put a lid on the box and we don't corner ourselves in on any one topic. So I'm hoping we do that and get lots of input. I also think that moving forward without communicating with the county, it would be a big mistake, because we need to know what they're doing so that we don't duplicate services. For example, the tracing, we know that they're doing that. What are they doing for mental health? Because I agree with several of my colleagues here. It's at the top of my list. As you all know, I've had 2 suicides of teens out in Natomas. Domestic violence is high everywhere across the city. Child abuse is high and hard for children to report. The reporting numbers are going down because they are not in school, so they can't tell a trusted adult. They're in their homes. They're stuck. So what are we doing for child abuse prevention, domestic violence, and mental health services to any at-risk population, seniors, teens, anybody who needs help? It's something we've all talked about, but how is that monetized in our effort moving forward? And what is the county doing that we maybe could step back from, knowing that they're taking it on, and or partner to amplify the effort by sharing costs on those issues? Housing is another one that, in terms of the homeless services, which have been discussed, and the 300 folks that are in apartments now, that is a combination effort with the county, but led primarily by the county. And so I'm wondering what resources they're going to put forward towards rehousing. I'm also really interested in hearing from the city attorney and the city auditor as to what can and can't qualify as COVID related. I feel like that would really help all of us to better understand that, but it might be good for a future phase. Maybe as we put together these lists, and as Jeff's suggesting, the council members weigh in, and we, put pen to paper after we hear from the community today and from each other today, that then those lists can in part be narrowed by policy in terms of the auditor and the city attorney giving us good guidance and saying some of these things are and are not eligible services. So that would be, my standpoint on how we proceed. I'd really like to see a survey go out. Interested in hearing if others would do the same. I think the investment committee could potentially be a good partner. I'm not sure about the Measure U committee. That one is, I think, framed more specific to Measure U, but the investment committee that was created to advise the city manager is broader and has more participation. That might be good. You're right. There might be some people that need to be added onto that committee, so we could think about who that would be. And maybe some of the folks from the Measure U committee could be moved on to the investment committee too, if we feel that they should be included. I think that would be a great starting point. And then there's the list itself, and what I personally as a council member am hearing and what I think we should do. I'm just going to say this right off the bat. I think we miss the mark if we don't just admit right now that the number one thing has to be workers, people. This is the whole COVID thing is about people. This is about work and people being out of work for us. I mean, we know in our region, we sent people home and that worked, right? The hospitals are not full and our numbers have stayed low, and that's great. Social distancing, all the things have worked. But the price that we have paid is unemployment. And the line that Central Labor and the Center for Workers' Rights has helped us with is busier this week than it was 2 weeks ago. We have to help those folks. We have to have plans in place where we can keep people employed or re-employ people. So for me, that's number one, and the lion's share of this money. And I think I heard Councilmember Hansen and Harris say that, and I agree with them both. The lion's share of this $89 million from the city of Sacramento should be all about helping displaced workers and businesses. And, we talk a lot about small businesses because they're such a big part of our city. And I think that's true, but I want to be really specific about it. Locally owned and minority owned and women owned businesses particularly need to be addressed. There are businesses that won't make it back from this, and we all know that. But Midtown was hit so hard. I would have been okay with the whole first round. Midtown is full of thousands of jobs. Arden Fair Mall is full of thousands of jobs, and we just lost Nordstrom's. For a lot of people, that's their whole income, and it's gone now. They don't have a job to go back to. We have to address that. What is going to happen for the people who are living in the city of Sacramento, who are making their living to pay their rent and buy their groceries by working in a bar in Midtown or by working at a shop in Arden Fair Mall that's now shuttered? So I think that has to be our constant focus. We have to stay very committed to that end. And yes, it includes childcare and child assistance. Yes, domestic violence, mental health services, those are all very important things too, and things we can collaborate with the county on. My Vang's idea to bring internet access citywide, which you have included, Mayor, in your plan, is critically important. I think that is an amazing thing that we should definitely be doing. Natomas Unified did it in their school district. Sac City is doing it in their school district. We should do it for our city. For everyone that works in our city, they should have free internet access, because otherwise we can't even reach them. They can't even participate. We have to make that happen. The library has so far not been included. We need to include the library, both as a partner and as a recipient. Large employers need to be considered, like Nordstrom's. Food access, which we've done pretty well on, we need to continue with. But I think we need to ask the people what they need for food access. For many of them, they need somebody to go buy them groceries. For many of them, it's just really about the process of acquiring food. And we've got to talk to them about that. And then lastly, for me, I really think we need to focus on outreach, how we're communicating with people, because staying connected is how we will keep Sacramento moving forward. So how we talk to people and how we keep them involved in what we're doing as a city is really, really important. I appreciate the dialogue with the colleagues today. I can't wait to hear from the rest of you, and I'm really excited to hear from the community. And I think we're not going to solve this all today. No motion today, I know. But I do think getting as many ideas on the table and then sorting through those quickly, but also pragmatically, and this council laying out top priorities like workers and focusing on human beings that are affected by COVID is how we'll get out of this and be ahead of the rest of the cities in our region.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Councilmember Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think a lot of us are saying a lot of the same things, maybe in a little bit different manner, but the emphasis, as I see it, has to be on restarting this economy. I think all of the things that we hear that are impacting us both negatively and the potential positive impacts will come as a way of us either starting or not restarting this economy. I think if we don't restart this economy, domestic violence, child abuse will continue to go up and be a problem. I think if we don't restart this economy, I think we're going to see more people displaced. Homelessness will continue to be a problem. And we will have, I think, even more of an issue as it relates to other people that have been either displaced or chose to move to Sacramento, and then impacting our markets like our housing market, and disproportionately impacting people who are in this region right now and are looking for places to stay. So I think the economy needs to be restarted. I think several things we're doing, I think, are already potentially helpful or we're proposing to do, but I think we can do more. For instance, the streamlining of planning, I think, is a positive thing. I think it's something that will help our economy and help Sacramento start to redefine itself. And I know that there's some concern as it relates to less public input, but there has been public input, substantial public input, and we can always modify if it appears that, or if in fact this situation is being abused by city staff or applicants or whomever, we can make the modification. But the most important thing is going to be to get people back employed, revenue in their pockets so that they can stabilize their lives. In District 2, there are a number of things that I've identified as priorities, but again, it's led by investment in economic development, which has been consistent through recessions, through growth periods. There are parts of our city that always get left behind. And so economic development by way of making capital available to businesses, to locate here, to grow here, and to really solidify their foundation here, I think is very important. I think most of us have stated that either the majority or a substantial portion of the 89 million would be available for economic development. And I agree with my colleagues in that regard. However, I do believe we have to make a priority as well, youth and nonprofits. And so I have gone a little bit further in my analysis, and I've actually come up with some specifics that I think would be very impactful in my community. And I know each of us uniquely understand our communities and feel like we know what types of investments would help benefit the community. And so I'm not going to go through the details of my specific proposal because I think it's a little premature, but I do think it will be led by economic development. But also I think as a citywide gesture and in the citywide recognition, I think we have to look at ways of which we know we have needs and we know jobs can be provided. And then we also know that places for people to live will be available. And so I believe housing will have to be a very substantial part of this recovery. Housing, we know we need housing because housing will help us deal with the shortages we have. In addition to that, we know that housing will create jobs. And also, one of the other things we have to be mindful of is that housing will also help to stabilize property taxes and possibly even increase property taxes. So we get a 3-4 or maybe a 4-4 if we recognize that housing has to be a driver. Therefore, I think we need to look at incentivizing the early stages of the recovery by incentivizing housing. And I think it's a collective effort. I think all of us need to put our thinking caps on and figure out what is the most effective way to do that to help us reach the objective. So as we go forward in this process, I also, I think, and I know all of us put a lot of thought into it, I think the mayor's buckets are appropriate. I have no issue and think that as long as we recognize that there will be some nuances per district, this is not going to be a one size fits all. Different districts have different needs. Different districts have different opportunities. They have different challenges. And so in District 2 specifically, I think there are some things that I'm going to ask for as we go forward. I'll reframe right now, but I think, again, it'll be led by the opportunity to create jobs, housing, generate revenue, and also support our youth and our nonprofits. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm done, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not muted. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you fine. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we're good. I'm just turning it over to Councilmember Jennings, but maybe I wasn't.
Okay, I could keep talking if you want me to.
Well, that would be great. We'll come back to you.
I'm done.
Go ahead, Rick.
Thank you, Mayor. And I just want to take this time to thank you for your letter and taking the time out of your busy schedule to put a letter like this together. It was very thoughtful, and I thought the 4 categories were critical to helping us start the rebound of the economy, which is so important at this time. So I'm not going to repeat everything that my colleagues have already said, but I do want to say a couple of things as it relates to the process. We put out the $1 million how long ago? 30, 60 days ago?
45 days or so, yes.
45 days ago. And that $1 million, we ended up funding 100 or so businesses. And 1,300 applications that did not get funding. Is that correct?
Something like, I think it was more than that. I think there were more than 1,300 applicants. It was in the several thousands, I believe.
So my point being is that Councilmember Carr said it best. We didn't go far enough. We didn't go deep enough. We didn't go wide enough of a reach. But we have applications on file for people 45 days ago that are still struggling to try to keep their businesses open. So I just want to stop for a second and just say from a process standpoint, I have a significant sense of urgency because not only do I know what we did with the money that we put out there, but also, I've been privy to sit down and talk to groups of people, especially the Coalition of African American Businesses, in talking to them about the struggles that they're going through and the help that they need in order to get back to business and maybe continue to have a business. And so I just want to talk process just for a quick second, because I think we have to have a really, really good process in a tight time frame that's going to allow us to hear the people, hear what they're saying, and be able to meet the need in a way that is sooner than later. So I like the survey as a good start. I mean, I think that's a great idea. And I think if there's a way to do the survey while we do other things, I think it's good, because I think it gives us a way to hear the voice of the people without them having to come to a meeting, without them having to write a letter. It's just another mechanism that we can use. The letters and coming to the meeting are all good, but I think it's good that we hear from the people and we have a process that's transparent enough to make sure that we can hear from them. I like the fact that we're not, from what I hear from my colleagues, nobody's interested in creating a new mechanism. In other words, let's use what we currently have in place with the budget and audit, the city auditor. I like this workshop process, Mayor. I think that this workshop process should happen at least once or twice a month for the next 6 months to make sure that we as a council do the work that's necessary in order to inspect what we expect, to get everything that we're trying to make happen with the dollars that we have to spend and have the biggest impact that we have. Our workshop process, our council meetings, even in our council meetings, we need to allocate time to make sure that we get an update on the progress that we're making and what are the next steps. So every meeting, in other words, this becomes a subject matter to talk about, to be able to evaluate if we're making the kind of progress that we want. Getting the legal opinions of what what qualifies would be one of the good starting points. Doing the survey, the meetings as I mentioned. And people have already talked about the priorities of getting people back to work, keeping our businesses open or reopening them, whatever the case may be, addressing our young people, especially those, all of our kids. They're out of school right now. There's not going to be many summer programs unless we start the process of making that happen. They have to be our highest priorities, especially those that are in our highest risk neighborhoods. Restarting our community, our economy, and then also somehow finding a way for the city and the county to work together, because they have some resources as well that we might be able to tap into. So there's not much that has not been said that I don't support. I just want to make sure that from a process standpoint, we're involved every single step of the way, and we put the work in that's necessary to refuel this economy, to get people back to work, and get our businesses to the point where they can function and help us from a tax-based standpoint, and help us from a city of Sacramento that we love so much. So I'm very interested in making sure that we have the process in place to get to the results that we want.
Mayor, can I add something really quickly?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, I just want to say that we also have, through the Donate for Sacramento Fund, we've started to build some infrastructure. We've raised close to $1.3 million. Through the Asian Chamber, we've funded 160 small minority businesses on our corridors. Through United Way, $500 grants to literally hundreds of families. Tax Steps Forward, the Region Community Foundation. So there's some infrastructure there that we've been building over the last 2 months with Sierra Health, which has done a great job. So Just want to put that on the table as we're thinking about mechanisms to get monies out faster. I'm really reminded of John Wooden's piece, Be Quick But Don't Hurry. We need to be quick a lot of these things, but we need to be thoughtful and do them right.
Hurry up and wait, right? No,
Not hurry up and wait.
No, I know. I'm just kidding. So thank you. Before we turn it over to the public, I just want to respond to a couple things that I heard and weigh in on a couple of these items. I think the idea of a community survey is a great idea. I think we should do it. And I think there's consensus. I think we want to do it obviously relatively inexpensively. And it has to be thorough, but it also has to be fast, right? Not a month or 2 month long thing. We want to get the pulse of that community, of our community, as quickly as we can. All the mentions about the relationship with the county are really important. We have worked very effectively with the county, as you know, on Operation Room Key and all the homeless related issues. And there's no reason why that won't continue into the next rounds. Not just the rapid rehousing issue, which we cannot bear all ourselves, but on the whole set of issues that we are ready to respond to. I know they have significant responsibilities, obviously, to pay for the testing and the contact tracing and some of the public health related issues that will be ongoing for some time related to COVID-19. But where we can catalyze each other's resources and find ways to work together on the priorities that I and you have outlined here, that is a must. I know I've begun those conversations, Howard has as well, but let's figure out how we can elevate that. The other thing that I just want to put on the table without the need for an answer right now, from the city attorney, I think Councilmember Ashby raises a few others as well. The law says that the $89 million needs to be expended by December the 31st of 2020. What does that mean exactly? Does that mean that the money has to actually be in the community being spent by December the 31st? Does it mean that it has to leave the city coffers? If the answer is it just has to leave the city coffers, but it isn't enough time to actually fund all the end users, say those things that aren't, quote, as shovel ready, either on the infrastructure or programmatic side, do we want to consider holding some of the money in trust with some of our intermediaries? These are things I think we need to think about that are not frivolous issues around what it's going to mean to get the money. Because one thing we're not doing here is we're not leaving any of the money unspent. There are too many needs. So how we meet that very tight timeline, what the definition of expended really means, and then how we operate within whatever that requirement is really, really important. That may be as important as anything else that we do or know in the first couple of weeks of setting a direction here. Okay, thank you. Let us now turn it over to the public. Let us hear from those. Now this again, we're sitting in chambers here, just a few of us for all the obvious reasons, and the public is not in the chambers, but we do have a telephone system here. We've practiced actually. So I hope that this will work right, and it'll be the same requirement of 2 minutes. We'll ask you as the caller to identify yourself, and then to give your public testimony, and we will then move to the next person, unless any council member has a question of any of the speakers. Okay, are we ready to go?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We are ready. We have approximately 17 speakers in the queue, and I'll take my first caller now. Welcome to the meeting. You have 2 minutes to address the council.
Thank you.
You are?
Pat Fonkushida.
Hi, Pat.
Hi.
Go ahead, Pat. Pat?
Good afternoon.
Good.
This is Pat Fonkushida. We applaud the mayor's priority focus on small business recovery and assistance in the proposed CARE Act relief funds. Since March,
Well, it went right for the first 10 seconds. Let's see, Pat?
good afternoon. This is Pat Fonkushida,
No.
President and CEO of the Sacramento Asian Pacific Chamber of Commerce. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Pat, we heard you and we heard the beginning of your comments and then you cut off and now you're back. So are you on a good solid telephone?
I'm on a landline.
All right. Well, why don't let's start the 2 minutes over and let's see if this one works. Go ahead, Pat.
Okay, thank you. So since March, our chamber has been in triage mode. We've converted 6 of our full-time employees and 2 of our part-time employees working 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, helping the city of Sacramento small business community with issues related to the pandemic. To date, we have triaged over 1,300 small businesses that reside within the city of Sacramento, and conversations with these businesses are ongoing, relentless, and heart-wrenching. We know that no community or industry has been immune, but the effects of this pandemic have hit our minority communities particularly hard. Our partnership with Donate for Sacramento has allowed us to provide some support, but it is far from enough. From the beginning, the city has directed resources to small businesses. We urge the council, when considering a small business grant fund, to develop criteria that includes that the majority of these funds go to underserved neighborhoods. We encourage investment for funding for PPE. An aggregation strategy for PPE is crucial for our small businesses that can least afford to safely open. We also encourage support for local organizations and chambers of commerce. We recommend that you also include business improvement districts because of their close connection with small businesses. And finally, strategic investment needs are important component to help our most vulnerable businesses impacted by COVID-19. One last comment. Our chamber is not opposed to projects like Aggie Square or the California Mobility Center, and we look forward to working with those efforts to help build workforce pathways. We simply want to ensure that the CARES Act funding is a lifeline to help aid in the triage and recovery efforts of those most impacted by this pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Pat.
Thank you for the comments. Next caller, please. Welcome to the meeting. You have 2 minutes to address the council.
Well, good afternoon. This is Richard Lewis. I am the president and CEO of Broadway Sacramento, Broadway on Tour, Broadway at Music Circus, Broadway. Just want to thank the mayor for including the arts in his proposal. And also the fact is that we are a small business, so it's a twofold. So we greatly appreciate all of that. And I want to thank you very much for keeping the arts in mind and helping out to the degree that you're able to. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Richard. Next.
Thank you. Next caller, please.
Can I just say for the callers, I think it's maybe one of the issues here. Please don't look at the TV or your screen as you're calling, because there may be like some confusion, right?
Appreciate all of that. And I want to thank you very much for keeping the arts in mind.
Hello?
And helping out to the
Hello?
degree that you're able.
Welcome to the meeting. You have 2 minutes to address the
Thank you
council.
very much, Richard. Next.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next caller, please.
Hello? Hello, can I be heard?
Yes, you can. Please go right ahead.
Thank you.
And caller, please turn down the audio on the device you're listening to. We can hear the feedback from what you're watching online.
Yeah. Can't watch
Thank
yourself
you.
on TV here. Go ahead.
Oh,
You have
darn.
2 minutes. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is Maria Costa from the Latino Center of Art and Culture. How are you? Thank you so much, all of you, for adjusting to these difficult times and addressing the great needs of our city. I'm calling to say that I recommend, as do many of my colleagues, the mayor's approach to addressing how the COVID-19 emergency funds should be distributed. Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor. And to place emphasis on workforce employment, workforce development. I think many of the council members, thank you, council members, thank you, council member Guerra, for your assistance, have addressed this need. And so we support workforce employment and development, and hope that the monies can be distributed as quickly as possible. I know that the artists we fund are now completely unemployed, as many of our people are. Our small businesses are suffering. So I applaud all of your efforts. And Mr. Mayor, thank you so much for undertaking with your vision and experience the task ahead. I think we are in good hands.
All of us together. Thank you very much, Maria. Next.
Next caller, please. Welcome to the council meeting. You have 2 minutes to address the council.
Thank you. Hello, this is Matthew Burgess. First and foremost, Honorable Mayor Steinberg, City Council members, and City Manager Chan, I want to thank you all for allowing me the opportunity to speak on the CARES Act budget plan. As a role model and business owner in the city, I want to bring to your attention just a few of the failures that I think that were overlooked or not recognized, hoping that you would address it prior to adopting the budget. Mayor, first I'd like to thank you and the members of the City Council and the staff for the work that you've done. However, I have grave concerns with the plan, specifically when we talk about diversity and socioeconomic inclusion as it relates to Black businesses and suppliers within the city of Sacramento and the work contracts. And several of these businesses are local distributors that pay taxes. They distribute food products. And while my concerns are specific to hospitality and industry, I don't believe it's isolated. So I would hope that you would look into those things. After reviewing a list of current vendors utilized by the Sacramento City Unified School District, it was disturbing to find that out of 89 vendors utilized, there wasn't not one Black business used as suppliers. Many of the companies that were being used to service our kids were out of state or not even within a 120-mile radius. Several of those same companies that we're using here in this city have been around since my ancestors have been enslaved and pre-civil rights. And I find that heart-wrenching for the African-American community. I would also like to point out, Mayor, that the word minority has allowed African-Americans as a people whose back this nation and city's been built on to be further left behind economically. And it's really hidden, behind the term of minority. So I would ask that you all would go back, conduct your own specific study to the distribution and hospitality side of the business, aside from the Great Meals program, because I think you guys did a great job with that.
Thank you for your comments. Your time is complete. Will you make your final comment, please?
Yes. In closing, I'm hoping that the information provided will bring insights needed for you guys to make this more inclusive during this pandemic so that we all can strive and continue to be great Sacramentans. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you for your comments. Next caller, please. Next. Working on it. Welcome to the meeting. You have 2 minutes to address the council.
Hello, members of the council. This is Chet Hewitt. I'm the president and CEO of the Sierra Health Foundation. I want to start by thanking you all today for having what I listen to be a great conversation about how to respond to the pandemic here in the city of Sacramento. I want to start out by saying that we are in favor of the mayor's framework. I look forward to working with the mayor and with the members of the council about the details. As we know, most great ideas fail because of poor implementation. And we think the implementation of the framework will be essential to its success going forward. There's been a good conversation about small business recovery. We think focusing on those aging and older corridors are going to be essential. Clearly, issues around youth and workforce training, the arts and creative economy, as well as homelessness and rapid rehousing are key issues for the city to address. I would also ask to just be mindful of the disparity in terms of the impacts of COVID-19, particularly as it's had on communities of color, and make sure that their ability to access services and supports are at the top of your list of priorities. It's said by many folks that it has impacted different communities differently, and that is not just in the geographic sense, that's also based on your race and your class standing has also made a difference in this particular pandemic. And we believe that those particular issues need to be part of a conversation going forward. I also want to say that, the idea around what needs to happen relative to surveys is a good one, but I hope that that's going to be done, that it's done quickly. A quick story, my son and I were down at South Sacramento Kitchen Center delivering food on Saturday, loading up cars to be delivered to shut-ins and others. It was very interesting because at the end of the day, we actually were loading it in the cars that were driven up to the front
Thank
of
you
the
for your
church.
comments. Your time is complete. Will you make your final comment?
Yeah. And all I want to say is that it was very interesting to see the eyes of folks who did not get food. There needs to be a family component of this for domestic violence, for food security, and other programs as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chet. Next, please.
Next caller, please. The next one. I'm getting you in now. The first transfer. Welcome to the City Council meeting. You have 2 minutes to address the council.
Hello, Mayor and Council. It's Barry Brim, 2021 U Street. I live in Midtown. My day job, I'm the president of the Greater Sacramento Economic Council. I just want to add commentary to the fact that the last few years, we've worked very hard to move away from our previous economy because it lacked inclusion and high-wage jobs and social progress. And that movement away is going to be accelerated with digitalization. So we want to make sure that we continue the path of building a better economy, continuing to focus on inclusion, social justice, real wages, real health care. That requires not only a transformation in skill sets, and whether it's the upskilling of digital skills, access to the internet, but it means moving towards tradable sectors like the life sciences, mobility, tech, things we've been making progress on. And it's my hope that when we decide how to invest this money, that we're going to focus on bringing real wages to people. Any company or business that receives assistance should be expected to pay a living wage. They should be expected to pay health care for their employees. And then hard skills like certifications in Salesforce. Even with a high school diploma, Salesforce certification is netting $56,000 a year in the marketplace. So our hope is that we continue to move towards this modern economy, that we do focus on small, medium enterprises that are part of the future of the economy. We're going to go through a very painful period. We think there should be universal basic income as part of the next recovery. We know the shock to Arden is going to be very difficult, but we are confident in our ability to pivot this economy around our universities, around our neighborhoods, as long as we're focusing on where the economy is going. It's becoming more sophisticated, more digitalized, greater emphasis on science and technology, and all the data and evidence from Brookings Measure U that we worked on.
Thank you for your comments. Your time is complete. Please make your final comment.
So thank you very much for hearing me out, and we're all here to support each other, and I'm looking forward to working together in the future.
Thank you, Barry. Next.
Next call, please. Welcome to the meeting. You have 2 minutes to address the council.
This is Diane Wolf. The City Council has an incredible opportunity to make a sustainable, noticeable, and meaningful contribution to addressing the problem of homelessness in the Sacramento region. $80 million could purchase permanent homes for nearly 1,000 people who are now living on the streets of our city. That is more than a third of the unsheltered population tallied in the point-in-time count. If the 80 million is divided up into multiple pots of 20 million here and 20 million there, there's a huge risk that no single effort will receive enough money to make a meaningful difference in any one area. And the money will have been squandered in trying to please everyone with no one truly benefiting. Additionally, money alone won't return the economy to its pre-COVID levels. Money invested in businesses that customers don't feel safe in will be money wasted. In contrast, while many might initially complain that the money is all going to one segment of the population, the overall benefit to the city of substantially reducing the very visible pain and expense of people living on the streets, in parks, and on riverbanks will be shared benefit for the city's population as a whole. But it's important that the money be spent in a way that is most cost effective in an overall effort to address the problem of homelessness in a forward-looking, sustainable way, not a short-term, big splash fix that will not contribute to a long-term solution. The city must develop a comprehensive plan to ensure that this money is spent as a meaningful and cost-effective investment toward ending the homeless problem in the Sacramento region. Let's set the goal to make homelessness a one-time, short-term event for anyone falling victim to it, rather than an inescapable reality of life moving forward. The city's comprehensive plan must include a strategy to reach that goal, with concrete projections of need and cost and a
Thank
clear...
you for your comments. Your time is complete. Will you make your final comment?
I'd urge the city to do two things: commit to spending the entire $80 million to increase the supply of permanent housing, and two, to commit to immediately appointing a commission to develop a comprehensive plan to end homelessness in the Sacramento region. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane. Thank you.
Next
Next.
caller, please. Welcome to the meeting. You have 2 minutes to address the council.
Good afternoon. This is Nolise Edwards. I'm chair of the Sacramento Women and Girls Advancement Coalition. Thank you for allowing us to have input on this issue. We submitted a letter to the council with some of our proposed recommendations that we hope you consider as you move forward. In short, we are asking that you use a gender lens as you develop your decisions about priorities, partners, and processes. We know that the COVID-19 crisis is affecting women and people of color in disproportionate numbers and essential care workers, workers and caregivers. In short, a couple of issues. As you look at your grant-making process, we request that women be involved in the decision-making roles to determine where the grant-making dollars are being distributed. We also ask that the city engage the auditor or other entity to assess how the funds are being spent and produce a mid-report for the council to ensure that the funding is being distributed where needed. In terms of childcare, we all know this is an essential service to get people to work and have them sustain their jobs. So we support any resources in this area. We also support Councilmember Guerrera's request for funding for support of our child care and early learning facilities, and the funding requested for the parent participation program through our school districts. In terms of small business, we hopefully hope that you include women and minority businesses, minority-owned businesses in this endeavor so that they can receive the support proportion to their numbers. In terms of housing and homeless, we include the intimate partner violence in this area. We ask that special attention be paid to ensure that the needs of single women and parents with children are accommodated, as well as temporary shelters for victims of intimate partner violence. In our letter, we also address some recommendations for youth and workforce training, as well as after school and youth enrichment. And so we look forward, as you move forward, to being engaged in the conversation and be a willing partner in support of your framework. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nolise, and to the entire coalition. Appreciate it. Next.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next caller, please. Welcome to the meeting. You have 2 minutes to address the council.
Thank you very much. My name is Jim Gonzalez. I'm the chair of the Latino Economic Council. And first of all, I want to applaud the city council and the mayor for your early decisions on this pandemic. You have saved lives, and now moving on this 89 million, you are going to save livelihoods and also address other repercussions of this crisis. The Latino community makes 30% of the city's population, and we urge the council to support the mayor's proposed CARES Act framework and funding priorities. The community investments that you are going to make are very, very special. We are happy that Councilman Guerra has taken some of our recommendations and already pledges to pass those on to the budget committee. 60% of respondents to a Pew Research Center poll says that 61% of Latino families say that they or someone in their household has experienced great job or wage loss due to the coronavirus outbreak. It is very clear to us that the Latino community has to have a seat at the table. So as we move with the investment committee and other hearings, all we say is that the Latino Economic Council, the Sacramento Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, our coalition of community-based organizations is ready to be at that table and do what's best for all Sacramentans. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jim.
Next phone call, please. Welcome to the meeting. You have 2 minutes to address the council.
Go down.
Hello. Welcome.
Hello, my name is Mike Jaskey. I'm a member of District 6. I support a major expenditure on homelessness, especially to permanently house all those homeless people now lodged in motels as part of the COVID-19 response plan. There is opposition in the e-comments from business interests saying that no money should be spent on housing and homeless, but any money spent locally flows through the economy and helps everyone. I am concerned, Mr. Mayor, that your written proposal has the city manager directly bringing forward specific projects for review and approval. A project that's shovel ready today doesn't necessarily mean it's the best option. Instead, the city manager should be directed to bring back some kind of a mini plan showing how homeless spending can be best devised, including the options that are recommended for going forward and enumerating the options that are rejected. This way, the council and the public will understand the relative merits of the projects that are proposed compared to others. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mike. Appreciate it.
Next caller, please. Welcome to the meeting. You have 2 minutes to address the council.
Thank you. My name is Jay King. I'm the president and CEO of the California Black Chamber. I would first like to say thank you to the city council, the mayor, and the city manager for ensuring that we as a community are involved in a process of how we will disperse these federal resources to the different communities throughout the city of Sacramento. And it's not lost on me on how willing the city has been to be inclusive of marginalized and challenged communities. With that being said, we are a state chamber that is positioned and active here in Sacramento and throughout the state of California as well. So we get a bird's eye view of where this type of cooperation isn't happening. We see Sacramento as a very special place that can lead the state and the country on how these resources can be fairly used to help small business owners, especially in the African American community. We have many small business owners here in Sacramento who are members of the state chamber that have been overlooked in the stimulus package, loans and grants programs, and they're afraid that it might happen here. We would like to be one of your partners who will ensure that that won't happen. We have the capacity and the expertise to carry out a process we believe will be fair, equitable, and transparent so that everyone who is qualified and ready to get their business up and running not only get the cash resources to do so, but the necessary training through workshops and seminars using our partnerships with the SBA, the SBDC California, Max Reach, and Zip Business Services LLC. Just giving money won't be enough in our opinion. We believe If we help African American small business owners learn how to put proper business protocols in place, we will ensure that they will become economically stronger and financially independent. I am prepared to meet with and speak about this request with the city and my staff, as I know today is not the time or the place.
Thank you for your comments. Your time is complete. Will you make your final comment?
But we want you to know that we're here to help the city and the African American small business owners build a strong and fruitful partnership moving forward. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Jay. Appreciate it. Next.
Next caller, please. Welcome to the meeting. You have 2 minutes to address the council. Caller, you have 2 minutes to address the council. It appears you're having technical difficulty. You may hang up and dial back into the queue. Next caller, please. Welcome to the meeting. You have 2 minutes to address the council.
Good afternoon, Mayor Steinberg and City Council. I'm Allison Tagley, and I'm here representing the arts community. I'm the Executive Director of Friends of Sacramento Arts. And as you know, Friends was established to address the number one goal of the 2018 Creative Edge Culture Plan as presented to you and the Council. The $20 million proposed in the Mayor's plan for the arts, creative economy, and tourism in the CARES Act proposal recognizes not only the importance of building on the Cultural Vitality Index findings from the Culture Plan, but also the economic shared reliance between a financially thriving arts and culture community with the small businesses whose very existence is based on the traffic generated by the arts. The arts and culture organizations are small and medium-sized businesses and must be understood as such. Building on the findings in the Creative Edge Culture Plan by investing in what defines our community is imperative to the long-term economic health. The 20,000 jobs, meaning people, that make up the creative economy have been drastically affected by COVID-19. The short and long-term viability of the small business sector, as well as the arts and culture organizations, is at stake. A portion of the CARES Act fund must be allocated to these public benefit community-based organizations so that they can get their folks back to work. Sacramento's investment in the creative economy is not nearly where it should be as compared to similar cities in the United States. By not continuing to make funding the arts and culture sector a part of the decision, we are moving backwards with the steps we have taken and should continue to take to ensure a thriving and vibrant community. Your decisions on the allocation of the CARES Act funds must be inclusive of all sectors.
Thank you for your comments. Your time is complete. Will you make your final comment, please?
Thank you very much for your serious consideration and your dedication to our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Allison.
Next caller, please. Welcome to the meeting. You have 2 minutes to address the council.
Yes, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
My name is Brian Powers. I'm a resident of District 7. On Sunday afternoon, I sent an email to the mayor and all city council members regarding these issues. I did not expect a response. I know you're all very busy with this and other things. I want to express my thanks to Councilmember Harris for his very nice response. The main point that I made was that, in my opinion, first and foremost, this $89 million of assistance needs to be used to provide support and relief for small businesses. This is the core element of our city that has been damaged by this virus. These are the people that pay taxes, provide jobs, employ people so that they can pay their taxes, so they can pay sales taxes, so they can use all the amenities we have in Sacramento. And it seems from what I've heard so far from the council members, nobody disagrees with that. The problem I have, though, is this, and Council Member Chenier said something that I think is very important. He said that the demand, so to speak, on this $89 million fund could potentially be in the multiple hundreds of millions of dollars. And I think what that means is that even the $89 million that the federal government has made available will not be sufficient to provide the essential support and relief that's necessary for small businesses. So one of the things that bothers me about the mayor's proposal is that it allocates only about 22% of the total fund to direct support and relief of small businesses, the owners, and the people that they employ. And you could adjust that and say, well, let's make it 30% or 40%. But for every percentage point that does not go directly to those businesses, we're losing businesses. We're losing money. And the effect of that is going to
Thank
be
you for your comments. Your
in place.
time is complete. Please make your final comment.
So my proposal would be that the bucket approach is incorrect, that there should be a prioritization with small businesses going first and other elements of the city coming after that, to be sure that we get the small businesses back and the economy back where it should be. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Next caller, please. Welcome to the meeting. You have 2 minutes to address the council.
Good afternoon. My name is Heidi Kaiser, and I'm the Public Policy Officer for Child Action. Thank you for all working hard to support children and families through COVID-19. I just wanted to share my support for the federal stimulus funding plan, and specifically, Child Action is in support of Councilman Guerra's proposal to provide $8 million in grant funding for private childcare facilities. Investment in childcare is essential for ensuring a vigorous kickstart to Sacramento's economic recovery. It will enable parents to re-enter and remain in the workforce. I've submitted an e-comment noting why Guerra's proposal is essential to support Sacramento families through COVID-19. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Next.
Next caller, please. Welcome to the City Council meeting. You have 2 minutes to address the council.
Hello?
You have 2 minutes to address the council.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and Council. This is Malachi Almen of the California Urban Partnership. We're incredibly grateful for the mayor's leadership in drafting a thoughtful spending plan for CARES Act funds. We also appreciate the mayor and council members for positioning our city to carry out an inclusive economic development plan, and strongly believe that the COVID-19 crisis demands a focus on inclusion as well as something much greater. As the city discusses the recovery strategy for all Sacramentans, we urge you to consider how the capacity to recover has never been the same for all Sacramentans. So embracing a commitment to equity is the only way to level the playing field and ensure that all residents will participate in the future economic growth of our city. With all of this in mind, we agree that a small business grant fund is critically important and urge that 75% of small business funds go to underserved neighborhoods, with a particular emphasis on addressing the unique characteristics of minority and women-owned businesses, targeted industries of small businesses, operations that were hardest hit, enterprises that received little to no previous local, state, or federal assistance, and entrepreneurs in neighborhoods linked to areas and commercial corridors within the Promise Zone and the core program zip codes. So with respect to contact tracing work that has to be done, we believe this is a great opportunity to center young people. Finally, access to free transportation and internet access will be incredibly important for young people and struggling communities of color in particular. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you very much, Malachi. Next.
Next caller, please. Welcome to the meeting. You have 2 minutes to address the council.
Hi, I'm Marbella Sala, and I'm a board member of the Gardenland Northgate Neighborhood Association. And I'll just go really quick. I was really pleased to hear that you want to establish a criteria and priorities. I think it's very important because the last way method that was utilized for the 1 million was basically first come, first serve. So those who knew about it were funded, and it resulted in an inequitable funding of small businesses, in particular minority and women-owned businesses. And I think this time an important criteria should focus on economically distressed communities, especially before COVID and now during COVID. Garden Northgate is such a community. Before the COVID-19, we already had a high unemployment rate in our community, and our small businesses, they're family owned and run, and they struggle month to month. With the COVID, I'm sure, and there's no doubt that our unemployment rate is going to double, if not triple. Our small businesses, many of our small businesses are probably not going to open their doors. And these small businesses, in particular on Northgate Boulevard, are the heart of our community. I also agree with the importance of a survey. We in GNNA already developed a small questionnaire just because we knew we had to start talking to our small businesses to capture their needs. Our businesses are not connected through P-bids nor a chamber, and the only way we could get their feedback was to go and speak to them, and we have already some of those surveys. But I agree that it should be a standardized surveys, and neighborhood associations and Chamber of Commerce and nonprofits can help you on the ground collecting those services, especially with small businesses that are minority owned. And in regards to job training, because I mentioned unemployment, job training is going to be critical in our community.
Your time is complete. Will you make your final comment, please? Your time is complete. Please make your final comment.
Yeah, I'll send some of my comments, but when we train these individuals in our community, we should make sure that they are able to get into jobs where there are openings.
Yep.
We should survey the businesses
That's the
and
idea.
find out what their needs are and then do training. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
By the way, that does remind me, on the survey we're talking about, it should include a business survey as well, if it's possible to incorporate our businesses, especially small businesses, into that outreach. Thank you.
Next caller, please. Welcome to the meeting. You have 2 minutes to address the council.
Thank you. Hi, Mayor, City Council. This is Buck Busfield. I'm the Producing Artistic Director and CEO of the Sophia Home of B Street Theater in Midtown. Thank you so much for your work on this. Every year you have to do budget work, which is an impossible task, having to choose between so many important, essential services, and now there's this where everyone's hurting badly. So we really applaud your efforts. I want to thank all of you and the outgoing city council members for their effort. I think that distinguishes you from previous city councils in the 30 plus years I've been paying attention, which is that you worked very hard to acknowledge that although there are different sectors to an economy, that economies are one. That there's only one economy. It's a holistic organism, and if one fails, all are hurt. So I ask that you continue that guiding principle as you try to tackle this most difficult challenge before you. And secondly, there is only one unifying factor between all the apparent divisions in the different sectors of the economy: government, for-profit, nonprofit, big business, small business. And that's, as Ms. Ashby said so eloquently, it's the people. It's the workers, the employees. So if you keep them in mind, that's where economies start. And it starts with them and works all the way up to banks. So I know you will. We trust you. We love you. And we wish you the very best of luck in this difficult time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Buck.
Next caller, please. Welcome to the meeting. You have 2 minutes to address the council. Welcome to the council meeting. You have 2 minutes to address the council. Please make your comments.
Hello.
Guiding principle as you try to tackle the most difficult challenge before you. And secondly, there is only one unifying factor
Caller, we cannot hear you. I'm sorry. If you could start over, get your name and start over. We'd like to hear what you have to say.
Hi, my name's Bobby Roy. I live in City Council District number 7. I just want to make a comment. Thank you for the plan. I think it also additionally needs an extra layer of analysis in that because the regional data on race and ethnicity is becoming available, we're starting to definitely see that certain communities are being hit differently by the pandemic. People of color are more likely to be working in essential jobs, and so they're at much greater risk of exposure to the COVID-19. Health inequities seen in pre-existing conditions like hypertension, obesity, diabetes, asthma, lack of access to quality health care, and underemployment are all factors that increase the complications in patients of color. Coronavirus kills, and structural racism is its accomplice. I have submitted a racial equity tool. I know that you have a racial equity manager in Amy Barnes who is more than capable of applying this analysis to any program that's put forward and to any relief efforts that are done. We know that other administrations are blaming people of color for their own deaths, which is unfair, and this rhetoric is meant to deflect criticism of their deadly and disastrous failures, not to end the global threat of COVID-19. So what I'm saying is that we want to center the needs of these communities, attack the disease with the urgency that the moment demands. Structural racism has always been a pre-existing condition, and ending the threat of the virus means attacking structural racism as well. All of society will benefit from this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it. I've received your document and tool and we'll review it. Appreciate it.
Next caller, please. Welcome to the meeting. You have 2 minutes to address the council.
Hi, this is Rick Larkey, Executive Director of the North State Building Industry Foundation. We're the workforce arm of the BIA, which represents over 500 businesses who build homes in the greater Sacramento area. I compliment the council and city staff on your efforts to put people back to work and to restart our various businesses within the city. We support the idea of reaching out to Sacramento County to increase the resource base to create, among other things, joint outreach, assessment, training, and placement programs for dislocated workers and those newly entering the workforce. The construction industry, especially home building, is still operating and hiring people in the Sacramento area. We continue to offer high school students internships and graduating high school seniors job opportunities. Building upon this effort, we've submitted a comprehensive proposal in partnership with the city's workforce development unit and the Los Rios Community College and several workforce and training agencies to assist in the recruiting, training, and placing dislocated and youth into construction jobs. We ask you support of this effort, and we thank you for considering our request. Good luck. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you.
Next caller, please. Welcome to the meeting. You have 2 minutes to address the council. Welcome to the city council meeting. You have 2 minutes to address the council. Caller, it appears you're having technical difficulties. If you'll hang up, you can call back into the queue. Next caller, please. Welcome to the city council meeting. You have 2 minutes to address the council.
Thank you. Hi, this is Tammy Dramer from District 6, and I run a small business on Broadway. I'd like to thank you all for your service to our community. I wanted to state today that I think these funds should be looked at in two ways and two ways. The first priority money should be spent on the immediate needs of our families. We have people who are food insecure. We heard a gentleman earlier speak that they had to close and leave people without food. We have domestic violence issues, and we have other serious problems in our communities that, we're not even going to be able to tell how extensive this is until, we do get a survey done as suggested by Councilwoman Ashby. So first and foremost, we need to meet the immediate needs of our families, and we need to be able to move those monies quickly. Secondly, there is another vote in Congress on Friday for more money for businesses. So, we need to front load this money that we have now to go towards families and for housing and for getting our homeless people into some permanent shelter. So, the small businesses, we need to help them first before we help with any developments that are planned. So spending money towards Aggie Square doesn't seem like a good use of these monies right now when we don't know how much it's going to take to make our renters whole and the landlords. So we need to prioritize our families and get them some immediate relief without a big bureaucracy. Thank you.
Thank you. How many more callers do we have, Madam Clerk?
We have 6 more callers.
Okay, very good.
Next caller, please. Welcome to the council meeting. You have 2 minutes to address the council.
Hi, my name is Andrea Lynch, and I just wanted to say thank you, Mayor and council members, on your thoughts and recommendations on how to spend the CARES Act money. I agree with many of the sentiments regarding small business, domestic violence, child abuse, and others. I just want to make the comment and recommendation to be mindful of the businesses that are most impacted, specifically minority, Black-owned businesses, inclusive of independent contractors. I also think there should be special care and consideration for child care services. It was already difficult obtaining affordable quality child care pre-COVID, which is further compounded with this pandemic. People will not be able to get back to work without child care. So I ask that this is one of the prioritization areas when viewing the spending of the CARES Act funds. Thank you.
Thank you for your calls. Next caller, please. Welcome to the meeting. You have 2 minutes to address the council.
Hi, Mayor, council members. This is Fabrizio Sasso, Executive Director of the Sacramento Central Labor Council. I have been listening to the meeting, and I got to say I'm a little bit disappointed in my own council members, some of the other comments from other council members that have not thought about, who are rushing to open the economy and haven't thought about how it's going to impact workers and consumers. And I want to emphasize that the protection of workers and consumers has got to be a priority when considering any kind of reopening of the economy and how this federal CARES dollars are going to be spent. We surveyed our affiliates, and we've talked to our members, and we've heard from people who are undocumented and unable to access unemployment insurance or COBRA benefits, or people who are struggling to pay the rent. And we are submitting for you some recommendations. One, to provide direct relief to individuals experiencing housing instability, food insecurity, and other financial hardships, including payoff of rent and expanding child care services beyond essential workers, homeless, catering to the homeless needs. Direct relief to small businesses should be conditioned on the protection of workers and consumers, including expanding paid sick leave days, mandating the sterilization and sanitation of all businesses, PPE for all workers, and prioritization for laid off workers to return to work, and the right to workers to refuse the unsafe working conditions. And city efforts to provide relief funds for small businesses should also focus on underserved and minority communities, and that no money should go to political entities that have engaged in political activities recently. We also believe that workforce development should not be a game of winners and losers. We don't know. We are being presumptuous about what industries will remain or even emerge out of this economic crisis, but people are in need of relief right now. Individuals, people. And that's the lens you should be looking through this: compassion, humanity, and what's needed for the people of this city.
Thank you for your comments. Your time is complete.
Don't rush.
Sir, will you make your final comment, please?
I know this is a tough decision, but please do not cave into the political agendas of those looking to line their pockets with the people's money, and that's intended to help workers and individuals with relief efforts. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next.
Next caller, please. The next caller is entering the queue. I want to remind folks to turn down any audio if you're listening from the website because there is a delay. Welcome to the meeting. You have 2 minutes to address the council.
Hi, my name is Zoe Tipping. I am a renter in District 4 with Councilmember Steve Hansen and Councilmember-elect Katie Valenzuela. I've lived in Midtown for about 8 years, and like I said, I'm a millennial renter. So I would like to see this particular round of federal funding relief prioritize affordable housing. My rent has personally tripled in the last 8 years while I've lived in Sacramento, and there is a complete shortage of future affordable housing in the pipeline, as well as other low-income related housing options. I would also encourage the council and the mayor to consider a stronger renters relief package and renters assistance. We only have 120 days to pay back potential debt, given that it might take a couple years to develop a vaccine and develop herd immunity, and we don't yet know the fallout of our economic depression that we're looking into. I would urge the council to extend it to 100, instead of 120 days, 12 months. People have had other debts as well when they consider their car, their utilities, credit cards, as well as unexpected expenses due to this coronavirus. So I think it would also be prudent for the city to use some of this money to establish a partnership akin to the EDD Central Labor Council, where you could have maybe a nonprofit who does debt and credit relief and financial empowerment, financial literacy to help people navigate their debts, improve their credit score, rebuild savings, potentially navigate bankruptcy because of this economic upheaval from the coronavirus. So thank you for your time. That might potentially look like maybe an online portal or a hotline, or maybe just a bigger program. But I think it's something that could be scalable with a small investment. So thank you.
Thank you. Next caller, please. Welcome to the meeting. You have 2 minutes to address the council.
Thank you. My name is Kevin McGrew, and I'm the Director of Quality Management at Siemens Mobility in South Sacramento. I'm also the President of Sacramento Valley Manufacturing Initiative, a nonprofit organization that is for manufacturers by manufacturers in Sacramento. Thank you, Mayor Steinberg and distinguished council members, for your consideration of the Charles A. Jones Manufacturing Education Center at Lemon Hill and Stockton Boulevard in District 6. We plan to develop real job training opportunities for manufacturing jobs with the support of the Sacramento City Unified School District and in partnerships with, among others, the California Mobility Center. The placement of these jobs would be built in because we are going to be participating manufacturers like in our organization. We'll be developing logistics, material handling, assembly, quality control, real jobs that can be placed, and we have jobs out there right now. The need is great, and we believe your consideration is appropriate for supporting small businesses, which is the majority of manufacturers in Sacramento, focusing on at-risk and impacted community members, and helping us develop pipeline of employees for our companies that lead to careers for our citizens that are hard-skilled, real jobs leading to lifetime careers. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Next caller, please. Just one moment. Mr. Mayor, we have 2 more speakers in the call queue. Welcome to the meeting. You have 2 minutes to address the council.
Hello.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, we can hear
we
you.
can.
Okay, great. Good afternoon. This is Betty Williams, President of the Greater Sacramento NAACP, and thank you for a great start with the proposed CARES Act. However, our concerns is only that 4 to 5 African American small businesses were able to receive an award with the first initiative, and the outreach of the African American and minority communities, in our opinion, was weak. However, it's important to the Greater Sacramento NAACP that you review the policy for distribution for this proposal. And since it didn't support African Americans and other minority businesses, we have been told that many did not have the information until it was too late. There should be a plan that will allow African Americans and minority businesses to have a fighting chance at the funding available. Otherwise, that includes oversight and or similar commissions. Without the commitment, we will see a graveyard of African American businesses and minority businesses before the end of 2020. The Greater Sacramento branch will be willing to work with you to secure the language that will support minority businesses and its survival during this epidemic. Finally, the Greater Sacramento NAACP is not in support of the AG Square based on the information submitted to our organization. However, we're willing and open for discussion for clarification. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next caller, please. The next caller is on hold. Welcome to the meeting. You have 2 minutes to address the council. Welcome to the meeting, caller. You have 2 minutes to address the council. Please turn down any audio if you're watching online. Caller, you may address the council. It appears you may address the council. You have 2 minutes.
Okay.
Please turn down any audio on any device that you're watching the meeting as there is a delay. Please speak through your phone. You have 2 minutes to address the council.
No, everything's off. It might be my dogs that are going to do me in, but everything's off.
You have 2 minutes to address the council. Please make your comments.
I can start.
You need to turn down any audio on any device and speak through your telephone. Thank you. It appears you're having difficulties. If you want to call back into the queue, we can re-enter you into the meeting. Next caller, please. Welcome to the meeting. You have 2 minutes to address the council.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. My name is Katie Maple, and I'm here representing Solidarity of Unhoused People, or SAC-SOUP. Since the beginning of the pandemic, we have been cooking and serving meals daily, building and deploying hand washing stations, working with medical students to provide care, and recently with a grant from Donate for SAC, we've been providing sleeping bags and tents for the unhoused folks in encampments, and we're very grateful for that. While we have an amazing group of volunteers, the need is so many magnitudes greater than what we can ever meet on our own. I believe there's an opportunity here to make a real and lasting impact by providing housing and services to those in need. I believe we should consider directing a majority or a large portion of these funds to getting folks off of the streets and into safe spaces, permanent housing, shelters, places where people can have a roof over their heads and start to heal. I think that this will limit transmission, which is obviously something that we're really taking into account right now. It will take a burden off of our police, fire, and emergency rooms. And I also love the idea of tapping into local restaurants. I know that we're doing that for seniors right now. Right now, we literally have people like myself and others who are cooking meals in their homes and taking it out to folks every day. And it's not necessarily the most efficient or best option. So I love the idea of employing some of the people who are currently out of work and some of these restaurants that haven't been able to open up shop to serve some of these meals to folks in the encampment while they're there, with hopefully the goal of getting everybody off of the streets, which I know is something that we all want. So that's my comment. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Katie, for your good work over these weeks in this area. We appreciate it. Is there any other callers?
Mr. Mayor, I have no more callers.
No more callers. Well, that was an experiment that worked well. And as long as, thank you, Mindy and Maria and your teams. I think really important that the public be heard directly, even if it is not directly in person. And the input, of course, is vital for us. I want to turn it back to the members. I know I have some closing comments and some suggested direction after conferring with the city manager here a little bit on the side. But let's open it back up to the members of the city council. Jay, Councilman Schneer, I know you had a comment.
No, Mayor, my comment was when we get to council comments, I'm good with where we are.
Oh, I'm sorry for council comments on the, does anyone have any other comments on either what you heard out of the public testimony or any other comments about the federal stimulus opportunity?
Yes, I punched up, raised my hand.
Okay, Councilman Carr. If anybody else, if you can text the city clerk or me directly, appreciate it. That's the best way for me to know that you want to speak. Councilman Carr?
So, Mr. Mayor, your original 7-page proposal, we can probably sum up in 4 lines. 1, small business support. That includes workforce development with a whole bunch of qualifiers as to who gets that.
Yeah.
1 was a creative economy. 3rd was impacting the homeless, getting the homeless up. And 4th was youth. And a whole qualifiers on that, both transportation, internet, a whole bunch of other things. And then during the discussion, we heard some more items. 1 was making sure that our residents had access to the new technologies, to Wi-Fi, to a computer. We also heard comments about we should be providing rental assistance, because when people get back to work, they're not going to get back pay. And so they're going to be behind 3 months at least. We heard comments about food assistance, that we should continue to do that we should take the CARES money to make sure that we continue to feed those who cannot get food on their own. And plus, it helps the local restaurants by providing food from there. Affordable housing. 1 member suggested we put the whole 82 million or 81 million into affordable housing. And finally, there was a good suggestion, I thought, that we would need to provide some financial literacy because people are going to be in trouble financially when this is all over. So we have a whole bunch of buckets. I think what we need to do next is for the council, either today or the next meeting or after we get the survey, to go through and weight these, let each council member decide what weight should be on each one of these categories so that we can then put the staff to work in further developing and refining the programs that will go under each of our weights, and that they have a true sense of what the council wants, what the priorities of this council are.
Thank you, Councilman Carr. Was there anyone else who was who wanted to comment further? Councilmember Jennings.
Mayor, I think you're going to probably answer the question of our next steps because I talked about a sense of urgency. My colleagues mentioned the same thing, and the steps that we have to make in order to make sure that the money is expended by the time frame that was talked about earlier. So I think you're going to talk about the next steps. I put a couple of proposals on the table as far as what organizations could be looking at this. The Budget and Audit Committee potentially could be one. I put those ideas on the table. I talked about having the board have a workshop either once or twice a month. I talked about it being a core agenda item on our regular board meeting, so that we're discussing this on a weekly basis to make sure that we're on target and on task. So I'm going to assume that either you're going to speak to that today, or you're going to go back and
sure am,
and work on how we make all those kind of things happen.
I sure am. In my closing comments, Councilmember Jennings.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Ashby.
Yeah, so my question is, or statement is really more probably for the city manager or auditor or whoever's going to put together the survey. It actually sounds like maybe 2 surveys are in order, one for residents and one for businesses, which sounds great, and how quickly we can get them out. But I'd love to see a version of that before it goes out, and hopefully my colleagues could too, and maybe everyone could contribute a little bit to what that looks like, or have some input on what questions are asked. My primary goal, though, is to be able to ask people how they've been affected without giving them checklists, so that we can get some feedback and that's authentic from them, from their personal experiences, so that if we're missing something, that we have an opportunity to catch it. We might also lay out some things that are check boxes, that's fine. But just some area where we can hear from folks and they can say in their own words what the big impacts have been for them. But I'll be interested in that, and also the timing on it. So city manager or whoever's going to spearhead that.
Madam City Attorney, can that input be received informally without a Brown Act problem in terms of what the questions of a survey? In other words, could the city manager consult with all of the members to get their input, or show them a draft of a survey without coming to the full city council?
Yeah, Mayor, I think the best way is for the comments to be sent to the city manager, and then the city manager can compile them.
But they also want to respond. I think I heard Mayor Pro Tem Ashby say that she would like to have a look at whatever the staff might be drafting as well. Is that possible to do without
I think
process?
The comments back to the city manager are the best way to do that, especially in the time frame.
Okay, so I think we'll have the city manager informally do the iterative process with members to make sure that your questions, your concerns in terms of what a survey includes, that it's comprehensive.
I think there are 2 parts to this. The survey, absolutely, we can do the residential or survey, and then the businesses. But the other set of comments from the council is input that's not included in the letter that was presented today, that I could take that and fold that in and bring that back to the council as well, along with what implementation timelines look like. So maybe that's...
Yeah, I think that's what I'm going to talk about next. Okay. And I think it's something that we can, that we all need to work on together.
Mayor,
I agree.
Can I just say one thing, finish that comment? So, Susanna, I'm not sure I understand your comment. It's no different than any other item where city staff would inform the council members and then the members would give feedback. I'm not sure I understand that, but whatever it is, if city manager wants to send it out, but obviously not to the whole group at once, and then get feedback from the council members, I don't see how that's any different than any other item we've ever taken in the 10 years I've been on the council. And then, yes, also, I was also wanted to say that I think it would be a great idea, Howard, to the extent that you could pull from the comments that you heard from our colleagues today, the central themes, and also the new ideas that were presented by some folks, and include those in a list. And then I don't know if the mayor's buckets are the right buckets, or if Councilmember Carr's suggestion to sort of window it down to 1 or 2 sort of overarching themes is better. But whatever it is, like incorporating everyone's ideas and then starting to include that feedback that we're hearing from other people too will, I think, help us ultimately narrow it down. I'm less interested in how we group it and more interested in how we just get to prioritizing. There was obvious theme today of employment and jobs from everybody. And so I'll be excited to see how we sort of put that together and how we focus on the subsects that folks talked about, workers in particular. That's it for me, Mayor. Thank you.
I think summarized on both counts. Yeah. questions for the survey and also comments from the council. It's my intent to send that out to all the council members individually, and the comments can come back to me to incorporate into the final document.
Very good. Anybody else?
Councilmember Carr was talking.
Oh, Councilmember Carr, are you back?
Angelique, understood. I wasn't talking about narrowing it down. I was talking about weighting it to see how much emphasis we place on each of the items. All of them we get a little bit, but where is the weight of the council? And that's what I want to get to. When we each of us has a different idea, we put them all together and see which one gets the highest priority, what's the next highest priority, and so on.
Mayor, could I add one comment?
Yeah.
Yes.
Also, me. I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Jay.
Oh, no, go ahead, please.
All right, Mayor. I just wanted to add, I'm all in favor of a survey. I want to make sure that it is statistically significant and the methodology is good. But I worry too much, and Alan, I think, said this really well, that we have to move with a sense of purpose, and that to make these decisions based on polling or surveys is probably not always going to lend to the best quick decision making. That being said, I'm fully supportive of that informing what we do, and especially, and I think Alan made a good point on this, that we'll adapt over time. So as we talk about moving money out, I think that it's important that we not push the entire amount out at once, but that we phase it so that it comes over a period of time, so that we can make those choices and adapt. I don't know what that phasing would look like. Maybe there's a bigger initial chunk and then other chunks that come in the middle of the year and then later in the year, like the third and fourth quarter. But I do think we have to preserve some opportunity to change as we go to adapt to this very insidious virus.
Thank you. Maybe I will sum up and then...
Actually, Daryl, real quick, if I could.
Go.
So my hope, and I lost you guys for a minute, but so I hope I'm not reiterating this. It's, if we got a lot of information from a lot of groups, backed by a lot of groups as well. And I'm hoping that our staff could maybe create a document out of that, which, if we want to use your 4 buckets as the framework, shows us what people are saying and who's saying it. I think that would be a really good starting point. And a lot of that information was based, I know Myvang did her survey. We did a kids survey. So we had 275 youth telling us what was going on. A bunch of the other ones had surveys also. So I think we have some pretty good information there. But I would ask Howard if it's possible for staff to kind of take all of that information and put it in a document that we could really take a look at and then start to make decisions. I also think, and I don't know when this is on our calendar next, Mayor, if it's next week. Again, I do think there's some things we need to get after very, very quickly. And I would hope that we can come back next week and have that discussion with even potentially some action items based on the input that we give over the week. I don't think we can wait much longer.
No.
On the individuals are suffering. We need to get out there and do something around that. Small businesses we know are closing daily. We need to get out and again for me and the young people in the city. What are we doing over the summer, and how do we get those ideas on the table as quickly as possible? Thank you.
Yes. Okay. Anyone else? All right. Thank you for a really important and productive discussion. I just want to make a couple of closing remarks. First of all, a couple of members mentioned it, and I think it's really important to reiterate it. Everything we do, I think, ought to be driven by our values, but we also need to have metrics and make sure that as we're spending the money, it is leading to the objectives and the outcomes that we all want to see. This is important in every area, but especially around the issues of inclusion and diversity, because we don't want to look back and say, or have people say, you were not intentional about focusing enough of these resources among our diverse community, within our diverse community, and among all of our neighborhoods. And so from the very beginning, and I would like to work with my colleagues, with the manager, with his office, to come back within the next week or two with a series of suggested metrics that keep us focused on where we are at, what we are actually trying to achieve, both programmatically, substantively, but also who we want to help here, because there's so much help needed, but there are people and communities who started farther back. And there are some, for example, who've received federal PPP loans, and that's wonderful. In terms of priority, I would not necessarily put that small business first before an entity or a small business that has not received any kind of assistance. So I think some intentionality around metrics and around ensuring that we have the diversity lens in mind as we begin spending this money is very, very important. I want to back up in terms of early action items and early wins, several things. The mental health issue, the domestic violence issue, the summer youth issue, because summer is right around the corner. And of course, direct grants and aid to small businesses and workers. And I want to get to that in a moment. I want to talk about, I don't know if it's an elephant in the room, but something that's come up a couple of times that I just want to get out there. We received some feedback, including from some of our allies, progressive allies, say don't spend any of this money on Aggie Square or the Mobility Center. So I want to explain to you what I meant by even making reference to those signature and important projects. We are not going to write a check. I would not suggest we ever write a check directly to another governmental entity in that way. That's not what this is about. But to the degree that we can use these signature projects, especially in their early stages, to train and retrain the people of Sacramento to be ready for the digital jobs, the life science jobs, the clean transportation jobs, and all the opportunity that will in fact be created through these initiatives. I think that is a very important nexus. Now, if those projects are not ready, so to speak, well, then we would act accordingly. But nobody is talking about writing a check. We're talking about trying to use the potential of these very exciting job creation initiatives, which, by the way, the Mobility Center especially, really consistent and important with our whole electrification, clean transportation, and climate agenda, to see if we can help retrain people who are going to be losing jobs in other sectors of the economy. So I wouldn't throw it off to the side, because no one is suggesting that we are going to just take a big chunk of this money and hand it over. It's all workforce. It's all connecting these initiatives and other initiatives to our neighborhoods. I want to go back to our values, because a number of members in the public talk about people and small businesses, and I think they hit it right on the mark here. What are our values? We help people as a city. We especially help people in need, and we especially focus on opportunity for people, for businesses, and for communities that are too often left behind. So one caller, I thought it was a good comment, but I didn't agree with it, said 22%, only 22% of the money is being spent on small business, and we ought to spend more on small business. Some called for direct aid to working people. And I believe that direct aid that was called for is absolutely appropriate and needs to be a significant part of our overall plan. Direct grants where we can provide that immediate relief. But if that's all we did with this $89 million, we wouldn't be helping people and small businesses as much as we actually could. And why is that? Because to give one-time grants out, they may be essential and necessary, but they're one-time grants. And if they are able to bridge and really help a business or individual survive, that's wonderful. The more fundamental problem, though, is that $89 million, as big as it sounds, will not go very far. It just will not go very far in terms of the numbers of businesses and the number of people in need. The other thing that I think is a little bit of a misnomer is if we don't see the connection between the devastation that is happening to a lot of our industries and the impact on small business and working people. What about all the people working in the hospitality industry now around hotels? What about all the people who work in and around our signature entertainment venues in the downtown and beyond? What about all the people working in the digital arts arena? There are as significant of impacts in this signature sector as one example as there is in the retail sector. So I think we always have to see the connection. Same with housing, which is an obvious one. If there isn't enough housing and people cannot afford to pay their rent, well then even direct assistance to small business or individual is not necessarily going to keep somebody housed. And so I laid out the 4 buckets, which again are not intended to be the perfect or the final answer, but just to say that there is a connection between assisting people and small businesses in the immediate term, which is appropriate and essential, but also making sure that we make investments that allow people and small businesses to shift in whatever way they have to either sustain what they are doing or to shift to doing something else where the jobs are and where the new industry is going to emerge. In terms of next steps, I've been whispering a little bit with Howard here. I would say next week we could do one thing, which is get clarification from the city attorney on this issue of the definition of an expenditure, because we really need to know that, because that defines in many ways our time frame. But then I would suggest the following. 2 weeks from now, we bring back the following: suggested metrics in the way that some members and members of the public have asked for, a final survey document. If it's not done before those 2 weeks, maybe it can be done before 2 weeks. A process for program and process review, either taking some of the elements that we talked about today, the relationship between the community, the investment committee, the city manager and his team, the budget and audit committee, and ultimately the city council, and a suggested timeline. And then finally, in 2 weeks, we bring back, as Councilmember Chenier and others noted a moment ago, some categories of what I would call early wins where the urgency is even the greatest. And I would say off the top, it is small business. It is direct aid to people, especially people who don't qualify for any other form of aid, including, many of our undocumented population, and youth, what we do for young people over the summer, small business, and individuals where the desperation is most serious and where they don't qualify for anything else. So it would be a couple of categories for early wins. So those are my suggestions. Take anybody's additional suggestions either now or offline. But I think we come back next week with some legal clarification on a really important issue and any other legal cleanup questions that get asked in the meantime. And then in 2 weeks, we come back for a substantive hearing where we actually begin voting to provide direction on the format, on the structure. I think whatever structure we vote upon, taking Councilmember Carr's point a moment ago, well, should it be all $20 million a bucket? I actually think those are good targets, but I think there ought to be flexibility within that, because we won't know until we get weeks or maybe a month or two into this whether or not one particular category rises and needs more attention than another. So I certainly am not stuck on a rigid formula here, but it does keep us kind of moving in a way down a relatively steady path together. So I think we've got a great opportunity here, everybody. And let's look at this. You guys, many of you served during the worst deficit times in modern history as city council members. I know I did as the state Senate president. And, think about it. We have a relatively balanced budget, which we're going to take up tonight. And we have $89 million to invest in economic recovery. Sometimes the disagreements become even more fierce when you have money to spend. But I will tell you, and you will all agree with me, especially those of you who experienced it, it's a lot better to be in the position we are in today than if we were sitting here having to take votes on layoffs and cutting city services. So just a little bit of perspective. Is there anything more to come before the council on this workshop?
And Mr. Mayor, I have no speakers for matters not on the agenda.
Okay, and Councilman Schneer had one comment on.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. And this is a request, I think, to the city manager and maybe to the assistant city manager, Mike Jasso. We've heard, and I think many of you, if not all of you, have heard from Region Restaurants about some of the fees being charged by food delivery services that are pretty astronomical. There are numerous cities who've taken action and actually passed ordinances limiting those fees, Seattle, Santa Cruz, and San Francisco being three of those cities. I would rather us not have to do an ordinance, but Mr. Mayor, if I could ask your assistance in this, if we want to have a chat with these folks and see if we can come to an agreement about what a reasonable fee is. And if not, I would ask our city manager to work on an ordinance that would limit those fees. Everyone needs to kind of share the pain here, and we don't need people making additional dollars off of the pandemic situation.
Very good, of course. We'll talk about that. Any other council comments, ideas?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councilman Guetta.
Yeah, sorry, I had my hand up there. I wanted to also bring up the issue that Councilmember Schneer brought up. I know a lot of the small businesses on the commercial corridors who have very small margins are having a tough time right now. So I think looking at the issue on the percentage of the increase is important. And I'd support working something out, if not going to law and ledge and getting an ordinance to look at that. So I want to echo my support with Councilmember Schneer on that.
I have one to close, but is there anybody else? All right, one last thing on rent relief, because it came up and I could have raised it during the workshop, but I didn't. Today, the California State Senate, Pro Tem Atkins and her caucus put out a very interesting proposal that I think we should at least look at as a city here and see if it has some applicability. What they proposed is given the dilemma we know that renters are going to face when they have all this built up back rent when the emergency ends. And even though there's an eviction prohibition now, that a lot of folks are going to likely be evicted if they can't pay the back rent. The Senate Democrats suggested an idea where if the landlord was willing to forgive all or part of the rent, the state would then issue a tax credit to the landlord that they could take advantage of over time. And that the tenant would then owe the state essentially the cost of that tax credit, but over a longer period of time. And I just wonder, as we grapple with this issue of how to help working people and our renters, whether or not there might be some applicability here and whether we might do that, i.e., I don't know whether this is possible. But if a landlord were willing to forgive the rent, we were to give a break then on the utility bill, for example, and the renter would pay back the value of that over time to our utility fund or some other fund. Would that be a way to provide relief to everybody? The landlord gets a benefit, the renter gets a longer time to pay, and the city is sort of the bridge and would ultimately get paid back. There could be many variations of that. We ought to get the city treasurer involved in that discussion, but it's the kind of thinking that I think we need to adopt here in Sacramento as we grapple with the fact that even with this 89 million, there isn't going to be enough money to provide relief to enough people. Are there other ways that we can be creative to accomplish many of the same ends? All right, we regather at 5 o'clock. If there's nothing else, we are adjourned.
Good job on the public comments.